Development and Land Use Committee meeting. Staff, can you do a quick roll call for us, please?
Ballard.
Here.
Clark is absent. Hoey.
Here.
Zamer.
Here.
4 present. We're also joined by Research Council Robert Wenner, Legislative Director Brian Jimenez, Junior Policy Analyst Alyssa Kamara, and Junior Legislative Aide Carly Johnson.
Okay, excellent. So today we're going to be discussing ordinance with the Historic Resource Commission's Holland Avenue Tudor Historic District recommendation. We've got several members of the public that have signed up to speak. So we're going to give everybody 3 minutes to speak during public comment. But before we start with public comment, I'm going to allow Councilmember Adams to just talk a little bit about the bill, and then we'll hear from the public.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. This evening, we're here to have a discussion on the change for the historic district recommendation for the Tudor homes, which are located on Holland Avenue. The properties that we'll be speaking of tonight are located at 100, 104, 106, 108, 110, and 112 Holland Avenue. This legislation is very important to the residents and many people in the surrounding area of Albany in regards to the significance that these homes have in our neighborhood that have been there for many years. Over the last year and a half, I've been able to have discussions with the owners of the property, along with meeting with the Historic Foundation in regards to the steps and processes they have taken thus far. Just recently, I was able to take a tour of the homes, and we're able to review the conditions of the buildings and wanted to have the opportunity to have a very informed idea of what the conditions of these homes are in, the possibilities that lie ahead, but more importantly, the most important thing is being able to bridge the communication between the owner and the Historic Foundation. So depending on how this legislation moves forward, I hope that the continuing communication between both parties moves forward in a positive light. So I thank everyone who has come out this evening to speak, and look forward to hearing from everyone here this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Adams. Just to give everybody a quick breakdown of how we're looking to have the meeting. I'm going to, after public comment, I'm going to invite the Historical Association to come and speak and do their presentation. After they speak, I'm going to ask them to join us here if they like, and then I'm going to ask the owners' representatives to come and speak as well, and then also offer them to come and sit with us and have a conversation. As we have this conversation, I'm going to ask that, you know, we keep it as civil as we always do in these chambers. You know, I do know that there are passionate sides on this, but I want to make sure we all are respectful of one each another. So, with that said, I'm going to ask for public comment. If staff can read the first name. Again, due to time limitations, we're going to be limited to 3 minutes a person.
First up is Julie Ludgren.
Thank you for joining us, and if you can just please give us your name and your address, please.
My name is Julie Lundgren. Live at Winthrop Avenue, Melrose neighborhood in Albany. and I moved here in 2008 and discovered the Tudors in 2009, and have been a frequent visitor and passerby to those homes. And you'll hear a lot more from others tonight, but to me, one of the most important things is here's this little enclave of houses with their unique architecture, brickwork, stained glass. Each one is different. And it's a little neighborhood complete with trees and landscaping, its own sidewalk. And for all the residents around there and all the people who come to work at Albany Med, the VA, and the schools there, it's a respite to the otherwise sort of drab landscape of parking lots. So these buildings are really special, and I hope you move to give them protection.
Thank you.
Louise McNeely.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Louise McNeely. I'm very active with the Delaware Area Neighborhood Association, and I live around the corner from these buildings. There will be other people speaking tonight that can say much more about the value of beauty and culture and the architecture, but I have two specific things that I can speak to. I'm the phone number and email address for the Delaware Area Neighborhood Association, and I can't tell you of any other interest that there is as much interest in as these Holland Avenue Tudors. It gets brought up at every meeting. I get emails about it all the time. If you go to our Facebook page, you'll see that it's the thing that gets the most attention. So I just want to speak to the fact that the neighbors really are paying attention, and they care very deeply about these properties. And it is not just our neighbors, it's wider throughout the city, where people ask me, what's going on with them? What's going on with them? And then the other quick point I have is I'm also in the Albany Home Ownership Center. And so I have the privilege of being part of education programs for prospective first-time buyers in the city of Albany. And we have hundreds of people every month that go through our programs and want to buy homes in Albany. And I know there are lots of options for how these buildings could be reused in a way that would be an asset to the city and to Albany. But I do want to mention that there is an incredible demand for homes for families, individual families, and that there has been a lot of interest specifically in those homes, and there are resources. Historic Albany Foundation can speak to this much better than I can, but there are certainly resources for bringing historic buildings back to use. We have some resources too, but we can tell you that there is a great need for homes for owners, first-time owners in the city of Albany. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next we have Matt Millette.
Matt Millette's unable to make it tonight, but he prepared remarks, so I'm going to read those on his behalf. Just for the record, my name's Paige Barnum. I'm also on the board, the Historic Albany Foundation Board. Here's what Matt wrote. To the members of the Planning, Economic Development, and Land Use Committee, first, thank you for taking the time this evening to hear the Historic Albany Foundation's presentation for Albany's newest historic district. And second, I apologize for not being able to be there in person with you. I will keep it brief. The English Tudor-style buildings on Holland Avenue are some of the most unique homes built during the 20th century here in our city. On their own, an English Tudor-style house is hardly rare, but what makes these so special is that they were part of a planned development. In addition to HAF's presentation, laid out is the level of detail, care, and craftsmanship that went into each one. They are excellent examples of early to mid-20th century residential architecture in Albany. It's special, especially now, because so many things in the environment around us have been stripped of that character and uniqueness. We've watched it slowly over the decades. Everyday items like park benches, lampposts, and yes, especially our architecture, have lost the details that make them unique. That loss of detail becomes the loss of personality. And when we lose our personality, we lose our identity. Without that, what are we? We exist, and that's about it. We can make the decision today to help protect a small portion of what makes Albany uniquely us. Thank you for my time. Matt Millett, President of Historic Albany Foundation.
Thank you.
Nancy Carey.
We're limited to 3 minutes as the owner as well.
I'm sorry, ma'am?
As the owner of the parcels, we're limited to 3 minutes.
Well, I limited everybody to 3 minutes.
I'll have to talk about this.
I'm also going to allow you and your representatives to come back
Okay,
and speak.
have a dialogue.
Yes.
Right.
So this is just public comment.
Thank you. So I am Nancy Carey. I'm representing the long-term owners of the 6 parcels located on Holland Avenue and who are directly and uniquely impacted by the proposal to create a new restrictive historic district, which is being considered tonight by your committee. The legislation and the application to the Historic Resources Commission that preceded it were submitted without the consent of the property owner, an unprecedented action, and if enacted, will impose extraordinary limitations and restrictions for an indefinite period and do nothing to address the challenges facing the city, including addressing the often expressed concern to focus on the demand for affordable housing. Most importantly, while a number of people have spoken about the importance of legislation, there has not been any recognition that if the limitations of a newly created historic district occur, the owners of these parcels cannot be forced to take any action, nor have advocates offered a vision for what is next and acceptable for a commercial zone located in Albany's healthcare corridor. The zoning does not allow residential occupancy. For more than a year, the owners, the singly impacted owners of the cluster, have been advocating for its rights as property owners and advancing clear and reasonable objections to the legislation being considered, which is, in our opinion, overreaching, unfairly shaped by those advancing dated points of view and pejorative characterizations of the owners. Tonight, I'm appreciative of the opportunity to share the facts related to the parcels. The present owners acquired the parcels in the early 70s, and at that time, they were owner-occupied. In the 1980s, the parcels transitioned to rental units. They were attractive to young professionals and graduate students due to the proximity of Albany Med, Albany Law, the capital. Over time, the management of undesirable tenants who did not respect the property and issues such as their failure to pay timely rents became untenable, and the rental occupancy ceased. In the decade that followed, there were ongoing efforts to transfer various parcels in which the owners were prepared to offer significant financial support for relocation of several of the structures. These included Habitat for Humanity, Albany Renaissance Corporation. Ultimately, these efforts were unsuccessful, and while the owners were a willing partner, these well-regarded groups were unable to commit to the project because they had other priorities. In parallel, these recognizable parcels were featured in a number of published reports and subject to community commentary. Yet despite this notoriety and a clear message that the owners would be open to a serious proposal, nothing materialized. Resources, time, and knowledge necessary to make residential occupancy a reality. Ultimately, the 6 parcels were vacant, and in keeping with the city's requirements, the owners registered the parcels with the building department. In doing so, we were required to disconnect all of the utilities, and in a climate of extremes, deterioration was unavoidable and the structures became compromised. The owners recognized the public safety risks and took steps to restrict access and entry to the property. However, the parcels became targets for trespassing, encampments, and squatters. Local law enforcement was unable to counter illicit contact and other illegal activity that was occurring. Copper, plumbing, electric wiring, and other systems were stripped by thieves. There were incidents where threat of fire exposed a significant vulnerability to those who encroached on the parcels, as well as our first responders. Trail cameras were installed to monitor and record activity on the site around the clock. They were stolen. They became an attractive nuisance and liability for them to remain. I offer examples such as Kenwood and Grand Street incidents to illustrate that point. The owners collectively determined that a careful and safe removal to be its best option, to have the structures safely raised and to look to the future. A permit was filed in June 2024 requesting a demolition permit. Shortly thereafter, an application to the Historic Resources Commission was sponsored by the Historic Albany Foundation for the designation of a historic zone. And with approximately 1 week notice to the owners, an application was approved by the Historic Resources Commission, which relied on dated images and falsely characterized the current conditions of the parcels, the significance and likelihood of restoration and reinvestment by the current owners. To compound the fracture, when the owners provided accurate and current images to the City Planning Department, and keeping with its own logistical deadlines, was unable to make these images available for review by members of the Historic Resources Commission. We appreciate those members of this committee, Councilmen Hoey and Adams, that have taken steps to tour the parcels and request that prior to any recommendation being made to the council at large, it be an informed one, reflecting the committee's commitment to due diligence on behalf of all the property owners within the city. We have been and remain willing to provide conditional access to the members of the council. And in fact, following a December meeting convened by Councilman Adams involving representatives of the owners and the Historic Albany Foundation, a good faith gesture was made to provide access to its professional consultants if action regarding the creation of the historic zone was suspended or withdrawn. It is important to note that Historic Albany Foundation rejected that offer, which had the potential to lead to a mutually beneficial remedy in favor of continuing to make a case reflected in its agenda and dismissing the rights and perspective of thousands of private property owners within the city. Further legislation being considered is in conflict with Albany's own designation and vision for the Holland Avenue corridor. In 2017, city planners, and without opposition from the current administration, designated this relatively small section of the city as mixed-use community urban, a designation that does not allow for single-family detached residents.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I did give you a little bit extra time, but I will, again, like I said, we're going to allow your representation and yourself to come and speak and do a full presentation.
Okay.
So we do appreciate you being here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Sean Morris.
Good evening. My name is Sean Morris. I live at 24 Marinello Terrace. I serve on the boards of both Historic Albany Foundation and the Delaware Area Neighborhood Association, which shares a boundary with University Heights, where the Tudors are located. For 16 years, I was also a member of the Common Council, 12 as the 7th Ward Council member. These affiliations underscore more than 30 years of being involved with neighborhood planning and historic preservation, especially as it relates to these buildings. Kara, our Historic Albany's preservation director, will tell you a pretty thorough story of the buildings, their importance to both Albany's architecture and its stories. I want to talk more about what these homes mean to the people who live and work in Albany and how frustrated we have been at the negligent actions of the owners and managers. My neighbors in the wider Delaware Avenue community are united in their affection for and identification with these buildings and have voted unanimously to support this action. Jesse Leonard and his family built many of the homes in the neighborhood, including those on Leonard Place, alongside Hackett Middle School. This enthusiasm radiates throughout the city and the region. Through the years, the homes have been subject of newspaper articles, columns, social media pages, and posts. They are frequent subjects of photographs and artwork. The same people who so enthusiastically love these buildings are also angered by the Peacock Company's inaction in allowing these buildings to deteriorate. How many hours have the people in this room spent dealing with deteriorating buildings and absentee landlords? How often do you hear from people in the community who are struggling to maintain older homes? And yet this wealthy company with the resources and the know-how to take care of their property simply doesn't. It's really disgraceful. I've watched these buildings closely since the early 90s and have watched them go from occupied homes to being relegated to student rentals to being cleared out and left as vacant with very little attention paid to maintenance. On their website, Peacock Companies proclaim themselves a full-service solution to your real estate needs. Yet this multi-million-dollar company with over 90 years of experience in this business is apparently flummoxed by taking care of 6 lovely homes. They haven't marketed them for sale or rent. They haven't secured them sufficiently. She refers to having installed security cameras. According to what she told me, they were on the road behind the house. So 6 homes, any of us can go on Amazon and order a security system that'll let us know if an intruder is there. That was never done. Attempts to rent them in years past were feeble. You know, just they rented to students and were shocked that students were unreliable tenants. I'm sorry, I just get so frustrated. And they were not on the vacant buildings registry for most of the 15 years that they have been vacant. Despite all of this neglect, the buildings do remain sound. They are not falling down. They are able to be reused, and they deserve to be preserved. It's important to note that the historic district does not prevent the owner from using it for something other than single-family residential. And I can't help but reflect on the irony that my last action as a Common Council member here for the 7th Ward was to oppose the zoning change that they got to accomplish what they wanted to build a drugstore across the street from these properties. So zoning is always an issue, but it's not one that's impossible to overcome. But they don't have to be single-family homes. And it can be incorporated into a larger project. You can look at every older city in the country and find ways in which people incorporated historic buildings and historic structures into a larger, more modern project, and it's done very successfully all over the world. They just need to apply a little imagination to the project or sell it to someone who will. Our laws here in Albany and in every city across the country is enshrine the ideal that we, the people of the city, have the right to say what our city should look like. We help mold development plans through zoning laws, building codes, planning boards, and historic districts. We have the right to say, you may not destroy this part of our city's story. I urge you to use the tools that Albany's laws give you. Pass the Historic Resources Commission onto the council for a vote. Hold hearings. Hear what your constituents have to say on this. Help preserve an important slice of Albany's history. Thank you for considering the issue.
Next speaker.
Albert DeSalvo.
Good evening. My name is Albert DeSalvo, 67 Glendale Avenue in Albany. August of this year will mark the 40th year that I've been in that house in this city. I don't want to repeat much of what Ms. Morris said, because a lot of what she indicated is something that I've been involved in also for quite a while. And I really urge the Common Council members and this committee to really look at this document that was prepared by Historic Albany, because it really points out the critical importance of these homes. I will say that the owners are practicing hardship by neglect. They're going to claim that this is a hardship, and there are actually laws against demolition when there has been that kind of neglect. I would also indicate that these homes, as Ms. Morris mentioned, can be used for many different purposes. The facades can be left the way they are, and the interiors can be renovated either for homes, they can be renovated for offices, they could be renovated for temporary residences for Albany Medical Center researchers. There's a lot of possibilities. And I would mention to the council that there's actually, I believe in most of the buildings, if not all of them, bathrooms on the first floor, which was unique, but it's what the Leonard brothers decided to do, which makes them particularly interesting for potential offices and handicapped accessibility. The quality of these homes cannot be ignored, and as Ms. Moore said, they are still in decent shape. Demolition by neglect is something that cannot stand in this city, and it's something that we must prevent. There's no reason why these buildings should be torn down. If the owner, the Peacock Company, wants to do development, they could put those properties up for reuse and build high-rise offices behind them in the big parking lot behind there. There's plenty of possibilities with some decent planning and decent land use that can be done without taking these buildings down. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Jennifer Jones Novak.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Jones Novak. Most of you probably know me as the owner of Cider Belly Donuts, and some of you know me as an advocate of preservation for the past 40 years. I grew up with preservationist parents. We live in 24 First Street in the Pembroke Triangle, so I'm very familiar with how to rehab houses, how to reuse houses, and I'm currently working on a project to reuse St. Joseph's Church. That being said, when I was 13 years old, taking the bus home from the Academy of Holy Names, I passed by the Tudors on the way to downtown. And that's when my fascination came to life with these buildings. I always wanted to know what was inside, who was living there, how did they come to be, because they're so unique to Albany. I spent most of my adult life, my formative life in adulthood in Europe, where they actually really embrace the historic structure and the uniqueness of structures. You can reuse these buildings in so many different ways. I have been asking my realtor since I've been back for probably a little over 20 years to buy or to rent one of these buildings and put Cider Belly in one of these buildings. It would be a great asset to the VA, to Albany Med, to the Pharmacy College, to Albany Law, to Russell Sage. In my head, I envision a commercial zone utilizing these buildings as a reuse project. And if they don't want the buildings there, then let's move them somewhere else where we can use them in a viable amazing way to benefit Albany. Albany is one of the oldest and most beautiful cities in the country. And part of that beauty are these old historic homes that you really need to take into consideration. I'm sorry, but when my realtor tells me time and time again, please contact PCOT, see if we can get one of these buildings, my realtor says, it's not gonna happen, Jen. They're not letting them go. They wanna demo the buildings. For 20 years, they wanna demo the buildings? Come on. That's not good business practice. I'm all for good business practice. Okay, I'm a business owner. I understand, I don't want anyone to take away my business. I don't want to take my real estate. But I also am a good steward to my community. And by being a good steward to my community, I invest in my property. I invest in my neighborhood. I invest in my community. I bring the community members in, and I also give back to the community. I would very much like to see these buildings remain standing, whether it's on their property or move them somewhere else. It would be devastating to Albany to see these buildings destroyed. I know many businesses that would love to go into these buildings. So I don't see where this is a hardship. If they put it on the market tomorrow, I would be the first one making an offer on these buildings. These are very important structures to Albany, and I don't want to see them destroyed. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Okay, so that concludes our public comments. Thank you, everybody, for coming out and speaking on this topic. So we're going to move to the second part of the meeting. We're going to have a presentation from the Historic Foundation, as well as I'd also like to, after the Historic Association Foundation speaks, allow us to ask some questions, and then have the owners' representation come and speak. I'd like to limit each presentation to 10 minutes, if we could do that, just to make sure we have enough time to have a good conversation after both presentations. I'd like to invite both groups to sit and be a part of that conversation. I know we have planning departments here as well. Does the planning department want to do a presentation?
We didn't prepare.
That's okay. Okay, great. So we got two presentations. We also have the planning department here. So what we will do is once we have both presentations available, we will open up to everyone, representatives from the owners, as well as Historic Foundation, to come and sit in the empty seats. The planning department, you can come sit in the empty seats so we can have a conversation. I do want to make sure everybody's aware. If you take that invitation, you are open to back and forth questionings from each other. So I just want to make sure I'm 100% transparent with that. Yes, Councilmember Zehner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask or express that this is not necessarily the only opportunity. You anticipate potentially another committee meeting on this topic?
Yes, I don't see us calling for a vote on this meeting, on today's meeting. I think that today is more of an opportunity for information gathering. So let's get all the information, let's get everybody in the room, let's have a respectful conversation with each other, and then at least we can have everything out on the table, and we can create some steps to move forward, as well as following meetings on this. I would like to have this wrapped up in 2 meetings. If it takes 3, that's fine, but I'd like to have 1 informational meeting and 1 discussion meeting, because I would like to have this go to the full body before the end of the year. I do believe this council deserves a vote on this if the committee seeks it out of committee. So that's why I'd like to get this settled within 2 meetings if possible. So this may be a longer meeting, depending on the conversation. So let's start with the Historic Foundation representation. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Karen Macri, the Director of Preservation Services at Historic Albany. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight. I very much appreciate 10 minutes. I thought it was 5. Thank you. I will not talk for 2 hours. I can absolutely give a 2+ hour lecture on history, but I will keep it to 10 minutes on the significance of the building, and I'm happy to answer questions, anything that I didn't cover that you want to know, I'm happy to answer afterward. I don't think I need to show where the buildings are. I think everyone's pretty familiar with they are on Holland Avenue, so I'm going to jump right into the criteria for listing. These buildings meet so many criteria. To be listed as a local historic district, you need to meet 1. These meet 3. One of them being that they meet at least 1 criteria of local listing. They meet 4 of the 5 criteria for individual listing. They possess, I don't need to read all of them to you, but I'll touch quickly on the ones they do meet. They possess very high artistic value. They very clearly embody the English Tudor style. There are not a whole lot of English Tudor style buildings in the city. In the 1920s and 30s, there was this huge, I don't want to say building boom because it was the edge of the Depression, but there was this movement toward these revival styles between Dutch colonial revival, mission style buildings, Tudor style buildings. We have a cluster of Spanish style homes that people rave about. Well, these are a cluster of Tudor style homes that people rave about. They're truly informal landmarks. If you ask anyone who's been in Albany, oh, do you know the Holland Avenue Tudors? They're going to say, oh yeah, I know those buildings. Or wherever I tend to go, I get asked about them a lot. So people very clearly know them. I would argue they may actually be more famous than Nipper. They're very, very well-known landmarks. I'd rather show, not tell, and I see some of my images may be missing, but to speak to kind of the character of the building and the artisticness of these buildings incorporate so many different materials. They embody every single characteristic of the style, and so much of the design of them was actually left up to the builders who built them. The architectural drawings for these are at the County Hall of Records, and they're pretty loose. They specify masonry on the exterior. So it was really left up to the tradespeople to decide how are they laying all of this. And the combination of materials that they used is just very artistic in the way all of it is laying, from bits of stone, brick, clinker brick. I mean, there's chunks of blackened brick that was in the middle of the kiln by the fire that's just crumbled and whatnot. The use of this is very different, and there's nowhere else in the city that you really see this level of artistry, especially in the Tudor style. While we do have a handful of buildings on New Scotland Avenue and a few around Buckingham Pond, they don't speak to the style or the material artistry at this level. It's not just the masonry. You can see here the stained glass windows, the hardware, the lighting. I mean, every feature of these buildings. I don't show the interiors, the one you just see through for the light, because they're not subject to the Historic Resources Commission review. But the interiors are even more fantastical, truly. For individual listing, these buildings need to identify with a historic person, something significant that happened, the same characteristics. They're a visual feature that's very unique to a location. I think everyone can agree these are pretty unique along Holland Avenue, given that they're the only residential structures that were ever constructed. So they have that. They are actually connected to 2 very unique people and people that had an impact on the city of Albany. They were constructed by Jesse Leonard, who had a real estate development company, and that's a tiny facet of what he did. His company was actually more of a one-stop shop. They did the mortgages, they had the lumber mills, they had every component. If you're going to build a house, they owned all the businesses that were going to be building them. And then they would sell you the coal you needed to heat your home when they were done. Leonard's, I don't want to say claim to fame, but what he's kind of most well known for is that he believed everyone deserved to own their own home. He was a huge proponent of renting to own, and he designed buildings that he felt were appropriate for people to live in. They were first homes. They were homes families could grow in, and that was his big thing. Everyone needed a home. Holland Avenue happens to be the middle of the farm his family purchased in 1862. He tried to sell the city Holland Avenue because he felt it was so important that there was a road that connected Delaware to New Scotland that he tried to donate the land first, and when the city said no, he sold it to them later. So he felt very strongly that this area was important, and he chose to build, his last project was the Tudors. They were the first 6 kind of show homes for an entire neighborhood. That would be University Heights, that would support the hospital, that would support the colleges, the new VA, was not quite built yet, but that was the whole goal, was to provide housing for the people who are going to be working in these businesses, companies, whatnot. So that was the whole reason for this. 6 were constructed, but there was a substantial plan for more. Over the course of his life, the Leonard Realty Company built over 650 buildings. So they did have a fairly substantial impact on development in the city. I can talk more about where that is if you want, but that's a separate lecture. Josephine Johnston is actually the kind of unsung heroine with these buildings. To date, Albany does not have a single landmark or historic district that is affiliated with a female designer, architect, building professional in any capacity. Josephine began at Leonard Realty as a secretary at the age of 21. By 1940, she was listed as a draftswoman. However, she had been designing buildings for Leonard almost since she started working there. She'd been credited for designing over 650 of the homes that Leonard Realty had built. After Jesse Leonard died, she was the president of the company. This is pretty rare in Albany. As I said, we have no other landmarks that celebrate buildings built by women. This needs to be the first. So these are the buildings as of last year. They were built from 1933 to 1936. The building, the top left, was actually Jesse and Josephine's home. It was a spec building that they used kind of as a show house and then moved into later once at least 4 of the others were occupied. Again, I can talk more and more about the style. I'd rather answer questions later. These buildings were kind of celebrated when they were constructed. They were constantly open for tours. It was always in the newspaper. There was lots of press when they were built. So they've kind of been famous pretty much since the 1930s. As I said, these buildings are informal landmarks and beloved by so many, including the families that used to live there. Actually, after this was presented to the Historic Resources Commission, one of the former families reached out to us and said, "We're so excited you guys are doing something about our family's home," and gave us a lot of their family photos of all of the buildings. They could not be more pleased. So these buildings really are important. It's also not just about saving a piece of architecture. We have a housing shortage. We have all kinds of issues with landfills that are overflowing. We're trying to be more sustainable. Reusing historic buildings is exceptionally sustainable. They can be homes, they can be whatever. There is really no limit. For the zoning that is currently for this district, I lost count of how many different uses there are for these buildings. As Sean mentioned, there's a lot of funding actually to reuse historic buildings. Ironically enough, local listing does not unfortunately come with a lot of financial benefits. There used to be a tax incentive that doesn't operate anymore. However, listing on the National Register, which Historic Albany has tried to do a few times, comes with a 50% tax credit. So there is a lot of money out there to reuse these buildings because they are historic. I'd also like to point out that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of historic buildings in the city of Albany that are in local historic districts or listed as local landmarks, which means there are hundreds, if not thousands, of historic property owners that maintain them, rehab them, reuse them in all different ways every day. It does not stop a property owner from reusing their buildings. Just like you'd have to pull a demolition permit, you pull a permit to do anything to the exterior of the building.
45-second warning.
Thank you. That's pretty much all I have. As I said, I'm happy to answer questions. I know Nancy had some additional time to make comments. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I'd like to invite you to come and sit with us as we have this conversation. And then we'll, after we have the presentation from the owners, we'll open up for questions from council members to both your association, and if the owners want to also sit and join us to the owners in their representation.
Thank you. I'd be happy to.
Thank you. And now I want to invite the owners, or the representatives of the owners who may want to come and speak.
I made my presentation pretty much during the public comment period, not realizing that there'd be a later opportunity. But I just wanted to...
Does anything else you want to add, or, you know, you've got
just
10
that
minutes.
The property owners are significant supporters of the city. They're active in various philanthropic and charitable works for generations, and characterization of it being anything other than a booster for Albany is just not fair. Please note, while these structures are approximately 100 years old, they are relatively young by Albany standards. There are thousands of houses of the same vintage located in Pine Hills, Buckingham Pond, Whitehall Road, Eagle Creek, Melrose, West Hill, and North Albany neighborhoods, to name a few. Are you prepared as members of the Common Council to expose your constituents to a yet unwritten regulation that effectively takes their privately owned property without consent? And are you prepared to defend the action using a rationale absent of accuracy and reflecting the opinion of several dozen activists that believe their perspective is the only reasonable one? For nearly a year, advocates of this action have been conducting an ongoing campaign to create this district, but has failed to share any vision for what is next. So we urge that you reconsider this, and we also, again, invite the council members that have not toured to contact us and we'll tour. And I'd just like to clarify one thing that was said during Ms. Morris's presentation. We did not ask for the rezoning of Holland Avenue. We did not, well, it all came from the city, and we did not build that drugstore. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it anywhere?
Yes, if you, if any of your representatives want to come and take a seat, I'd like to invite you. Okay, so, gonna ask, thank you, I asked the Historical Association, they had 2 other individuals that they want to join them, just so that we have an even feel of people representing the issue. I don't want anyone to feel like there's more than one person in the room. Then I also like Planning Department. If you come, join us. Take a seat, anywhere you like. Okay, so first we're going to start with committee members. So now the timers are off. I want to appreciate everybody for doing really well with your time given and staying within those time limits. So now we're going to open it up to committee members to ask questions of both parties as well as the planning department, or our legal representative if they have any legal questions. So it's going to start with committee members asking questions first. Councilwoman Zama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, everybody, for being here and giving us so much information. My first question, and I'm not sure who to ask it, whoever has the answer, what other examples of applying a historic designation without owner's consent? Anybody have any other examples in the city? Situations similar? Oh, you have to use the mic, please. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't usually get to sit at a desk like this, so I don't I was familiar with the microphone. To my knowledge, there's only been one other historic district or historic listing that had owner opposition that did not go through, which was initially the listing of 48 Hudson Avenue, the Van Ostren Radliff House, twice, once in the 80s, once in the 1990s. However, it is very common for historic districts to have a small handful of owners. Everyone has a different opinion. So in historic districts, there usually is some percentage of opposition. At the National Register's threshold is you have to have a minimum of 51% support, or rather you can't have over 50% opposition. It's an opt-out, not opt-in. And historic districts are made all the time. In fact, an expansion was done to the, I believe it's Washington Park District, that includes Spring Street. There were a few property owners that did oppose, but there was a majority of property owners who were for it. It's very rare that there's a historic district with just one owner.
Okay, thank you. Another question, and I think it may have been, you may have referenced this, the stability of the buildings. I'm just wondering what that is based on.
I didn't, that's a question that Nancy will have to answer. I have not been able to be in the
Sorry,
building for
somebody
years.
meant, Ms. Morris, maybe it was you. I just want to know, have you been allowed in them since?
Several of us toured 3 of the buildings 4 years ago now, 2021. They, and we had our, several architects with us during that tour who also the buildings that we were in were stable.
That's what I was going to ask. You had experts.
The city's inspection as part of the vacant registry is occurring next week, this week and next week. The city did not come back and inspect them. We do not know who removed that X. The city doesn't know, and we do not know.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat? You said there's going to be an
City Building
inspection next
Department.
week?
There's
So
one on-
I'm sorry, Nancy, if I can. I'm Chris Langlois, Governor Palazzo, PC. I'm an attorney for the owners. I'm going to chime in here where I can and kind of flesh out some of what Ms. Carey has said. Every year, there are applications filed with the city to register them as vacant buildings. When those applications are filed, that triggers an inspection by the city. That's happening in the next few days. The city will be coming out to do their annual look at the buildings. In terms of the red X, my understanding is the X isn't about building stability or integrity. It's simply a signal to first responders that the buildings are not occupied.
I thought that my understanding is that they could be structurally unsafe for first responders.
That might be one reason why they're
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Can
Thanks.
can everyone
when-
just, I'm going to just quick reminder, if everyone could just speak into the mic, please. I want to make sure that, so if you don't speak into the mic, it's hard for our guests to hear, but also you can't hear it online, which is part of our full transparency. So
Thank you, and
please.
I'll make this brief. I'll finish up. I just want to make sure I'm clear. How long have these properties been vacant?
Since 2008.
Since 2008. And how long have they been on the registry?
I
The
don't-
vacant building registry? I mean, a year, 2 years, 10 years, like,
Quite a few years. I don't have the first application. I actually might have it with me, but I could look it up and get back to you.
so there was an inspection last year?
Yes.
Certainly. It's been several years they've been on the registry. I don't think we can tell you exactly when that started, but it's been several years. And there's an inspection each year.
And it's important to note that a great deal of the boarding that you see is at the instruction of the codes department. They will call us if they see a broken window and instruct us to go board it up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, questions from, I've got Councilmember Adams and then Councilmember Howie. Councilmember Adams.
So just to add context to the conversation, I believe I was the last person to go in the homes, which was about 3 weeks ago. I'll speak to the condition realistically and bluntly. The interior of the homes of 106 and 108 are structurally fine. The flooring, the base foundation of the structures are in great shape, actually, for the age of the buildings and the fact that it has not been utilized. I walked the building with the contractor that I brought with me that day to be able to put eyes on the necessary work and repairs that would be needed for these to be rehabbed or reused and for whatever purposes. We toured the basement to look again at the foundation level. We looked at the flooring to again recognize that the floor, living room floor, first level floor, I'll say, is structurally fine. A lot of the repairs that we did notice, well, there's two things when you speak about the construction, because what you see is not always what's behind the wall or what lies. So we have to also hold that into context when speaking about the conditions of the building. So I can't speak about the electrical, although the electrical has been stripped, copper has been taken. These things are true to be missing. The other repairs are some issues to the roof in one of the buildings. The second floor, the bathrooms definitely need remodeling. There's still cabinetry and other items still within the homes that are existing. There's still items left over from the previous renters from years ago. We did go up to the attic to assess the attic to see what the conditions there were. Again, upon our review of looking at it, again, the roof in 106 seems to, again, be in good condition. We did not find any leaking, any water damage that has happened due to the homes being boarded up over this time period. I can only speak to that. We did go into 108 as well and did the exact same walkthrough for each floors, identifying the repairs needed for the kitchen and bathrooms, along with the bedrooms. Again, very unique homes. But in regards to the structure itself, we found that it was in sound condition. So I can only speak to that and provide what I found. I probably have the most updated photos from those things, but at this time, I just wanted to at least have the owners and their representatives to, again, explain and speak to their reasoning for what their goals are to accomplish with the property, and to have it a fair conversation. But if there's questions, as Nancy mentioned, she has offered us to, go see it for yourselves. So I'll leave it at that if people want to continue with any other questions.
Thank you, Councilman Adams. Councilmember Hulby.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everybody, for coming for this conversation. It's hard. It's hard for me to sit here and hear people say, we deserve the neighborhood that we want. I belong to a neighborhood association, and we feel that this should be this way. Take a look up at 1211 Western Avenue. And I am so ticked off from 2018, going down to the planning board saying this does not belong here. And the residents on Tudor Road, where we have tutors, by the way, didn't want this. Not one person in the neighborhood wanted it. So I guess the Delaware neighborhood gets more preference over the 15th Ward, the Eagle Hill neighborhood. So I had to get that off my chest, because I'm sitting here steaming, and I shouldn't. I should be professional and talk about it. Now, Councilmember Adams said he was there 2 weeks ago. I was there 4 weeks ago. I took pictures. I saw the basements. They're in terrible shape. We got pictures here that the owners just passed out. I took pictures too. I own 5 houses in the city of Albany. I know what it takes to restore houses. I know what it costs. These houses will cost between $500,000 and $750,000 each to restore into a livable condition. And when we talk about the housing shortage, well, we're going to have 6 families live in 6 houses when we could put up something else and have maybe a couple of hundred residents. It just doesn't make sense to me. And the final thing, because there's a lot more, but I got to try to keep my cool, the nerve that we can take away a private owner's rights for property that they pay taxes on, that they own. And it's just mind-boggling. You can't even walk down the sidewalk in front of those buildings. The sidewalk is sliding down the hill. I mean, it's just, again, mind-boggling. Now, I reached out to PCOT. I said, is there any way we can, do some kind of housing and stuff? PCOT is in the office space business. That's what they developed. That's what they've been doing for many years in the city. But they said they would be willing to work with other developers to see if we can get more housing is what the city needs. We got to move forward. And somebody made a comment about, oh, this multi-million-dollar company. Go around the city and see how many buildings have been donated. Go on New Scotland Avenue, right across the street from St. Peter's, see the PCOT building. Go into St. Peter's, see the PCOT setup that they've donated to the hospital. Albany Med has PCOT. Disability Services has PCOT. So they've been really good people. I don't see any of these new developers in this city doing anything for the city. So I'm convinced that, if you want these buildings, we should get them moved. I mean, and that's been offered. I remember reading about that. $1, they would sell you the building for $1, you got to move it. And in the old days, we used to move a lot of buildings. You can go up right by Empire State Plaza and see all the buildings that they moved there. So there is a way to do it. But should we find a private property owner, take away their rights? I have a hard time dealing with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoey. Again, I understand the passion in this, and I respect the passion on all sides. I'm going to ask if we can focus on questions at this point. And today's goal is to get as much information as possible. And the next meeting will be more of a deep discussion. So again, I appreciate the passion on everybody's that's been here today. So let's continue the conversation. Who had their hand up next? Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you. Again, just want to get some clarifying points just for educational purposes if people are not aware or know. So I'll direct this question to our planning department. And Aaron, can you please explain to us what the historic district means in other neighborhoods that currently have historic district? Yes, thank you.
Before you do that, if you going to ask everyone who speaks to introduce yourself, please, especially if you haven't spoken before. Thank you.
I'm Erin Glennon. I'm the Deputy Director of the Planning Department. I started off in the Planning Department as the Preservation Planner. So in the City of Albany, we have the Historic Resource Overlay, which is our local preservation ordinance. It applies local guidelines and standards to properties located within our historic resource overlay. And those standards and guidelines are applied to exteriors of a building visible from public right-of-ways. So that could be a street, it could technically be an alley, sidewalks, and things like that. But we are only reviewing exterior modifications, new construction, and additions to historic structures in the districts. That can be changes to windows, exterior cladding, exterior features that you see from the street. We have 15 local historic districts. Most of those also have state and national register designations as well. They're located throughout the city of Albany. Most are located kind of Washington Park into downtown, Arbor Hill to the south end. And so this would be kind of our first one in the Delaware Avenue, Holland Avenue area. And they range in size. So Center Square is a couple thousand buildings, where we have smaller ones like the Lark Street Historic District, which is a couple dozen. We have a Historic Resource Commission, which is made up of 7 members, local City of Albany residents who both have either live in historic districts or are professionals within the field of historic preservation. So is there, I guess, anything else, Commissioner Adams?
No, not at this time, but I have a follow-up question for Nancy. Can you speak to the programs or tax incentives that you and your organization find or know of that you have either presented or brought up in conversation that could assist with projects like this?
Absolutely. So the biggest incentive for rehabilitating a historic building is one that's used actually very commonly in Albany, especially in the downtown historic district, which is the coupled New York State and federal rehabilitation tax credit. Together, they can be up to 50%, minimum of 40% of your rehabilitation costs. As I said, they're very widely used on a range of buildings. Obviously because they're for commercial properties or non-owner occupied, so they'd have to be a rental. But they're used for single family homes that are rented, up to 100-unit building conversions downtown. They have had a hand in the conversion of every single historic building pretty much in the downtown historic district. Obviously not new builds, but the conversions of other buildings, all of them have used tax credits.
Sorry, just to clarify, you said that there's been conversions or where there's been up to, or you can have up to 100 units, 75 units, 50 units, a mixed-use building.
There's no cap on how many units, and it doesn't have to be for housing. Many buildings are converted, whether it's for office space, retail, schools, anything. There's no cap on what they can be used for.
So for example, something could have a commercial first floor and have a office level, maybe on a second level with additional housing built on.
Correct. The additions would not be eligible for the tax credit, but any work on the historic structure would be. That's another thing about these buildings is that they can use the tax credits, and it's becoming kind of a national standard in areas where you have historic buildings like this to couple the tax credits with a new build. In fact, it's actually being used in the South End Historic District right now for some of the land bank clusters, where they're using tax credits to rehab the buildings where there are missing teeth in between, and then they're building buildings in between those missing teeth. So there's nothing that says you cannot build behind, if you really wanted to build in between, or in otherwise around, adjacent to, touching, whatnot, those historic buildings. In fact, a large structure behind those buildings on the flat part of that land, as these are kind of on the edge of the hill that dips into Holland Avenue, there's land for a substantial mixed-use building that also has a parking component that could include tax credits if these buildings were a part of it.
Thank you for that clarification. Erin, you had something?
Well, and also one thing that Kara didn't touch on with the tax credit program too is that organizations like the Albany County Land Bank or Historic Albany Foundation, who they themselves are nonprofits, can actually sell on the tax credits to either individuals or pass it on to future homeowners so that they can take advantage of those tax credits, which makes owning a historic home even more affordable. But I also wanted to point out too that Kara kind of brought this up a little bit earlier. It's not defunct, but we still actually have a tax abatement program for our local historic properties in local historic districts. City Assessor Trey Kingston has been working with Pat Fahey on making some revisions to that, but that still is available to property owners that have gone through and received a certificate of appropriateness for modifications to their properties. and they just have to provide that information, and it's a 10-year abatement program.
Gotcha. My final question is to the PCOT representatives, and just asking for if you can provide the council and everyone here just the plans that you previously had for these parcels, and if you have changed any plans to any development there, or what your goal is there. Sorry.
So Nancy, just so I'm clear, you're asking, had this application not been made, what is it we would have liked to have done with this property?
Correct, yes. And if anything has changed because of this.
To answer the second question first, since this application has made, we had not advanced our demolition permit. We've paused it. We had asked Historic Albany to pause their application and perhaps meet and see if we could come up with a path, but they turned us down. That was the meeting that you set up in January, I believe. The plan was to build a mixed-use office building that would front on Holland Avenue with some retail on the ground floor and mostly medical occupancy on the upper floors. We have not advanced those drawings very far since we don't know what's going to happen.
And can you speak to the expenses that you maybe spent already in regards to having to get the drawing started, or just some of the pre-work that you were getting up to as to where you are now?
We've spent tens of thousands of dollars on engineering work, but we put that contract on hold as well.
And has there been any communication since our last meeting when we kind of discussed holding things off? You mentioned there hasn't been communication, but has your office reached out back to the planning department, or has the Historic Foundation reached out to you with any resources to assist?
Neither. We haven't reached out to planning, and we have not heard from Historic Albany.
May I respond to that? We did not, we are not willing to drop the historic district so we can see the inside of the buildings to provide free services for PCOT companies. As soon as the local historic district nomination is dropped, then the process for hearing the demolition permit proceeds. It's not a choice, that's how that works, unless they actively withdraw it.
Which we offered to do.
Yes. However, over the last probably 15 plus years, Historic Albany has also provided quite a bit of free architectural services. In fact, was it only 4 years ago? When we toured the building with our preservation architects, they were producing sketches, no, not architectural designs that you could pull building permits from, but they were producing designs for how you could incorporate the Tudors into a larger project, which would include basically what that property, or what you're looking to build there. We have tried to be very upfront and work with them, again, the 17 years that I've been at Historic Albany. But when we're told, no, we're not willing to talk to you unless you drop this, I don't believe that's a legitimate desire to communicate. So we did not continue to reach out, as we took that as a meeting. They didn't want to continue discussing that with us. At the same time, when we did have a determination of eligibility done for listing on the National Register of Historic Places, which brings tax credit eligibility, there was information shared about that, and we've been very upfront with all of the grants and tax credits that are eligible over the last 15, 17 years.
Okay, again, please put the mic as close as possible. Our technology is not as advanced as we'd like it to be. Okay, other questions by committee members? Okay, I've got a couple of questions. So I'm going to ask a question that I'm hearing from the other side. So what I'm hearing a question from the Historic Association, I'm going to ask the owners. Then I'm going to ask a question that I'm hearing from the owners to the Historic Association representatives. So hopefully we can get some of these tougher questions looked at a little deeper. The first one's going to go to the owners and their representatives. So a question that I'm hearing from the Historic Association is, why should we allow a property owner that has owned the property for decades and has allowed it to decay under their ownership to demolish properties that have significant value to the community? And anyone from the owner's representation can answer that.
I think the only way to answer it is that, as Councilman Hoey said, we're not in the business of renting residences. We're not in the business of converting homes into other uses. It's not something we've ever done. So these properties don't fall into what our business model is.
Okay. Does anyone else from that side want to say anything?
At the risk of stepping on Nancy's words, one of the answers to your question is it's the owner's property, and they have the ownership right to decide what to do with it, like everybody else who owns property in this room. And we push back on the characterization of demolition by neglect. We do. And they were occupied for a while, they were rented for a while, there were efforts made to transfer them to the Albany Renaissance Corporation, to Habitat for Humanity. We tried to find people who were willing to move them. At a certain point, they remained unoccupied. They were registered as vacant properties. And as one of the consequences of that is that you have to disconnect utilities, if I understand that correctly. And that, I think, has accelerated a little bit of the dilapidation that you've seen in some of the photographs, because there's no heat, there's no running water, they're not being occupied. But at the end of the day, like any other owner, we have to look at the properties and figure out what makes sense for us going forward from an economic perspective. If we're going to make an investment, we have to know there's going to be a return on that investment. And we've looked at different options. They can no longer be used for residential purposes based on the current zoning. It's not allowed in the mixed-use district. There are options to convert them for other zoning appropriate uses. There's costs associated with doing that work, bringing them into ADA compliance. And you look at that investment versus the return, does not make sense for the owners. The idea that Ms. Carey described of developing it for retail office space is one that makes sense, and that's what the owners decided was the best use of their property. And we appreciate the passion that some people have for these buildings. We do. But at the end of the day, this has 100% owner opposition to the application. And for the tax credits, the other benefits of historic districting, that really makes sense when you have a motivated owner, somebody who is looking for assistance, credits, breaks to try to rehabilitate property. That's not the case here. That's not what the owner is looking to do. And one of the questions I have for the committee members is, if this legislation is adopted by the Common Council and this district is created, what happens after that? Because, that classification may stop us, the owners, from getting a demolition permit without having to go to the Historic Resources Commission first for permission. But at the same time, it's not going to force the owner to put any money or to develop the property. So my concern is, it's a short-term victory, I suppose, for the preservationists, but they're going to sit as they are today, month after month, year after year, until at some point, we're at a stalemate. So until there's an answer to that next question, I don't know that it makes sense to go forward with the legislation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then my question to the Historic Association, which is kind of like a flip to the same question I asked the property owners. Why should the city restrict the actions a property owner wants to take on when they look to demolish a property that is in decay?
I think there's several answers to that. One is that demolishing 6 buildings to build 1 building on a not excessively developable lot is probably not only not the highest and best use of that land, but also produces quite a bit of building waste. We're trying very hard to be more sustainable. When there is a large parcel directly behind that building that is substantially better suited for a large building. There's no impediment for building what they want to build there. Those buildings are not in the way. Also, they purchased those 6 single-family homes, not being in the business of doing residential real estate. That's a question. I absolutely understand property owners, you deserve to be able to do what you want with those properties, but to buy residential buildings and sit on them when that's not your MO doesn't really make sense. But there are lots of other developers in the city that is their MO. And everyone can win. There can still be a big mixed-use building behind, and there can still be 6 rehab buildings that are used and occupied, and everyone wins. It doesn't have to be an either-or.
Okay. Well, I'm going to let Ms. Morris. Okay, thank you. I'm going to allow Planning Department to say a few words.
I just want to address the demolition review and then also use of the property. So the historic resource overlay does not prohibit a property owner from applying or demolishing a structure. There is a hardship modification waiver for demolition. There are a number of standards and information that a property owner would need to provide in order to go through that process. But much like the demolition review for a property outside of a historic district, it would either have to go to the planning board for that or the Historic Resource Commission for a property located within a historic resource overlay. So no matter whether you're in a district or out of a district, you have to go through a demolition review process. Also, the historic resource overlay guidelines and standards are much like other land use and zoning controls. They don't necessarily prohibit a property owner from doing something with their property, but it just provides guidelines for how they need to go about either modifying or constructing within a historic district. So again, we're not taking away controls or what somebody can do with their property. It's just kind of a standard or a process that you have to go through in order to get permission to do so.
Okay, thank you very much for that information. Any other questions by committee members? Councilmember Hoey.
I have to make a comment. They were saying that, 6 houses that they want to tear down and we're short of houses. But where were the people when we tore down, I think it was 8 houses for St. Rose to put up a parking lot? They were rentable houses. There were 2 3-family houses. Nobody spoke up, and it's not that long ago. And where's St. Rose now?
May I respond to that? Actually,
Sure.
Historic Albany did speak up for that, and we share your frustration with the project on Western Avenue, and we spoke up for that too. But we're in the same boat that you are. We all lost on those.
Yeah, well, there's somebody over there that allowed it to go up, and it's still there, hasn't been worked on. People are saying they're going to tear it down. And by the way, they damaged Peacott's property right next door, right next to the university administration building. A wall fell down and almost hit the building. Well, it actually did hit. Parts of the building came down and hit my employees that I work with, cars. So yeah, there's frustration there that I'd just like to see a level playing field where everybody's treated equally. And unfortunately in Albany, it doesn't seem that way. It's whoever's the loudest gets what they want. But thank you.
Just to clarify, we own both parcels on either side of 1211 Western, and the developers came in and trespassed on our property and damaged our property and almost broke a gas line. It's an extremely dangerous situation.
May I just say this has no bearing on the tutors?
I know.
I
just wanted to
will say that,
clarify why.
I'll say this. I will say this. I know there's a lot of passion about development in our city on both sides. This one, I guess this 1211 Western Avenue was one where the Historic Association and neighbors seem to have been on the same side on it. So it seems like there's definitely times where we could all come together on certain issues, and there's times where we have disagreements on certain issues. That is the beauty of being a resident of Albany, is that we're all here, we're all going to do the best we can, and we're all going to have times where we all get together and agree on something, and we're going to have times where we all disagree on something passionately. But luckily, we can still do that freely and openly. So I appreciate, again, the passion on everybody's on all we spoke about. Any other questions or comments by committee members? Okay, I'm going to also, I'm hearing none. Any other comments by either the owners or by Albany Housing? I'm sorry, Albany Historic Foundation. Would you like to make any additional comments? Okay.
No, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, again, I appreciate everybody taking your time to meet today. Today was a good discussion. We do plan again on meeting hopefully within the next couple of weeks. It's going to be tougher. I know it was difficult to get everybody here today, so I appreciate the fact that we were able to get both sides here to have these conversations openly. With that said, do I have any any motions to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. None nay. The meeting's official.